This is Susie. Susie is a nurse working at Dr. Keloid's office. She wants to be the best nurse possible. Susie was a quick study in school. In mere months, she had mastered the ancient art of temperature taking. Susie studied hard in order to learn how to properly fill out paperwork, but Susie knew it was essential to Dr. Keloid saving lives. For her thesis on taking the human pulse, Susie studied thousands of cadavers. But when it comes to the emotional needs of her patients, Susie hasn't yet learned that Jell-O isn't always the answer. Let's take a look at a day in Susie's life. Here is one of Susie's favorite patients, just after lunchtime. And Susie has come to clean up. Though the patient has been doing better and better physically, emotionally, it's another story altogether. Obviously, the patient isn't done with her meal. And Susie, could you let in some sun? Thank you. And, as we all know, positive reinforcement is always appreciated. Dr. Keloid is delivering some bad news to her patient today. Unfortunately, she doesn't have the time to provide proper interpersonal support. Susie has to come to the rescue. What are some things that Susie can do in this situation? She could provide false hope through lies and gifts. Or, with honesty in mind, Susie could help the patient come to terms by picking out a grave. She could try to care for her patient by providing a type of physical comfort that no one else could. Or she could initiate an in-depth conversation concerning the patient's well-being. Encouraging the expression of feelings, both positive and negative, improves the patient's awareness of both their medical and emotional situation, thereby allowing them to heal completely. This also helps to establish a caring moment between the patient and the nurse. The emotional support Susie is able to provide is extremely important to the curative process, especially when science has little to offer. But Susie's professional understanding of the situation helps the patient come to terms with the situation themselves. Later that afternoon, one of Susie's patients approached her complaining of a persistent and nagging cough. Susie quickly spots the exacerbating factor contributing to the patient's condition. But the patient, ignorant of current research, fails to see the connection between her habits and her illness. Susie decides to talk to the patient about her smoking habit, but can't, for the life of her, decide how. Susie ineffectively tries nagging, one of Dr. Keloid's personal favorite techniques. But in her tempestuous youth, the patient learned not only how cool smoking was, but also what it was like to have a nagging mother. Desperate to help the patient, Susie considers physical confrontation, but decides against it upon receiving estimates for the cleaning bill and the thousands of dollars in fines. Always a good study in school, Susie decided to try her own brand of reverse psychology. Unfortunately, that brand is her patient's favorite. After spending some time with her and talking, Susie realizes that her patient has never been properly educated on the dangers of smoking. After contemplating all her options, Susie decides to gather materials to teach her patient so that she may be able to make her own healthy lifestyle choices based upon her own informed decisions. Using outside sources of information, such as pamphlets and websites, encourage the patient to educate themselves further, as well as legitimizing Susie's advice through statistical and illustrative examples. Often, these materials are provided freely to the medical community and are widely available and extremely useful. Objective statistics provide an outside vantage point from which the patient can more clearly see their own condition. By allowing the statistics to speak for her, Susie is left free to form a relationship with the patient to help her understand how the statistics relate to the patient's own life. The patient then has the option of changing her ways based on not only what the nurse thinks, but what the patient has grown to know. It's getting to be the end of a long, long day, and Susie is getting prepared to go home. While performing her final duties, Susie is approached by a patient complaining of severe stomach pains. What should Susie do? She could tell the patient that they have reached the end of their business hours, and that if she still has the complaint tomorrow, that she should come back during operating hours the next day. As part of her introduction to the hospital grounds, Susie could show the patient the beautiful view outside, and while the patient is busy admiring the wildlife and the beautiful garden, Susie can bolt out the back door. Susie could begin gaining the patient's trust by leading her to her bed before Dr. Keloid's examination. This way, the patient will feel warm and secure, completely unsuspecting for when Susie leaves the room and replaces herself with a clone. Finally, Susie decides to live up to her professional responsibility and stick around to assist the patient. Susie remembers that these are people in need, and that a hospital can be a scary place when you get there, especially when you're dealing with an illness. With the help of Gene Watson's theory on nursing, nursing nirvana may finally be at hand. With just a few simple changes to her attitude and nursing routine, Susie is able to take on the whole hospital all by herself. Thank you, Gene Watson, for all your help in improving the lives of both patients and nurses alike.